Okay, we are live. Welcome to KiteTalks. We have a really special guest with us today. It gives me real great pleasure to introduce Peter Drury. In fact, he doesn't need an introduction. Peter, well, he is the poetic person in commentary for football. You talk about the Zidanes and the Messi on the field. Well, off the field, we have Peter Drury. Peter currently works with BT Sport with the English Premier League, Champions League, and Europa League. Peter, it is really an honor to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time out. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure is mine, Aaron. Really good to speak with you.
Awesome. So, Peter, our audience is it's young sports business professionals, ones who want to get into the industry, and of course, again, they know you as somebody who's behind the mic, so to say, and discussing sport. But I want to talk about your experience. I want to talk about you. And you've been in the industry more than a couple of decades. How did you get into commentary? Was it passion, or I mean, just tell us a little bit about that, and then I'll jump into some of your experience with BBC.
Yeah, Arab, I got into it, I guess, by a series of fortunate accidents, a lot of good luck, and then I suppose also, in fairness, with hard work as well, and being in the right place at the right time. You know, during my adolescence and early adulthood, it really was nothing more than a distant pipe dream. But I got in to the sort of bottom level of sports journalism and worked up from there, and have been fortunate to get good breaks at the right moments in my life.
Any particular stories of you, I mean, really pursuing this? Like you said, I mean, the lucky breaks, right? I've heard stories of people really going to production offices and sitting out. And is there any kind of story like that for you?
Well, as I say, it's right place, right time, really. When I left university, I became a trainee accountant, which was being in the real world, really.
What did you study, if I may ask?
At university, I studied politics, and then I became a trainee accountant. And during my month as an accountant, I guess I realized that it wasn't going to be for me, and that I had a little dream and I would pursue it. And so I quickly gave up on accountancy and started writing letters of application to newspapers and radio stations and all of those things. And I, like everybody in a very competitive industry, I had a lot of rejection. And then I got a chance with what was at the time, and still is actually, a very well-reputed sports reporting agency in London, which gave me the sort of fundamentals of experience.
This was back in the 80s, right?
This was at the end of the 1980s, yeah, I think 1988.
Nice.
And off the back of that, I got my first sort of major break in broadcasting when I applied for and got a job with BBC local radio in Leeds in Yorkshire.
Nice.
And I had 2 or 3 great sort of training years there. And I was in the right place at the right time when BBC Radio Sports expanded with the advent of 5 Live as we know it now. I was one of the sort of founder members of that. I was with the BBC for 8 years, and then I got my big chance on television when an iconic commentator for ITV, the big commercial network in the UK, was coming up to retirement, and I was recruited in time for the 1998 World Cup in France. Did a dozen years or so with ITV, and then the furniture moved a bit, and since then, since 2012, I've been freelance and working predominantly in that time for PLP, for the Premier League around the world, but also others, including, but not exclusively, BT Sport and plenty else besides. And I've been a lucky boy.
No, I speak for probably millions around the world when they say, listen, I hope Peter Drury is commentating for this game, and it's amazing to hear you speak. Back to a little bit about the ITV. That was a time when social media was coming in. There's a lot of different mediums. how have you seen sort of the whole broadcast game change across, I mean, over the years?
Well, social media has had a massive effect on all of us, hasn't it? And I still choose not to engage in it because maybe because I'm a dinosaur or a fossil, and I just don't feel the need, but also because I find it just engulfs you. You know, it can take over your world, and I can prefer to do without that. But undoubtedly, it's there. And yes, it's had an impact on broadcasting because everything is live and immediate and everywhere in a way that I guess it wasn't back then. I'm relieved, I must say, and I don't want to say it sound in any way discouraging to the young professionals like yourself who are finding their way in it now, but I'm relieved that I got to launch my career before social media, because the scrutiny that it brings about on a young broadcaster can be tough. You know, not everybody loves you all of the time. And as many sports people say, it can be crushing to see a critical comment. You know, you can see 100 lovely comments and 1 or 2 nasty ones, and the ones you remember are the nasty ones. That's human nature, and I don't have an especially thick skin. And so I'm quite glad that those formative years for me were pre-social media. But social media is where we're at now, and you guys who are coming through now have to learn to live with that. And indeed, I know there are many positives about it. You know, that social media enables you to put yourself out there, to gather a following, to become prominent, to publish work if you want to publish work, and so on. And in that sense, obviously, within what is a very crowded marketplace, it gives you a chance.
True. Mona, personally, I mean, when you said you got your big break with ITT, and at that time, did you have a mentor of sorts? Did you have somebody who was guiding you through that process? And
not especially. I mean, certainly that was my television break. I think probably my biggest formative break was getting into BBC network radio, which back then certainly was considered a real sort of broadcasting academy. Some of the great names in British broadcasting had gone through that, and the day I pushed back the door at Broadcasting House, the London headquarters of the BBC, was for me a wow moment. You know, and I learned to probably more there than anywhere else. But yeah, I mean, ITV was the big television break, and I've forgotten what your original question was, Arup. Where am I going with this?
If you had a mentor or somebody who guided you through the entire process.
The mentors had, I mean, nobody specifically, but a lot of people at BBC Radio. That was a very nurturing environment, actually, where just being alongside people and working with people, it was a lovely, lovely team. But I've been fortunate all the way through that, if you like, the sort of generation before me have always been very kind to me. So there were iconic BBC football commentators, John Motson and Barry Davis, who were very different types of commentators, very different types of men, but both very kind to me when I interacted with them. And Brian Moore, who was retiring as I joined ITV, was also immensely kind to me. I have a letter from him in my attic stored away in a cardboard box somewhere, which I cherish hugely, basically telling me that he thought I'm okay, you know, and whenever I, you know, certainly in my younger years, whenever I had a bad day or, you know, I thought the world was against me, I could go and have a look at that letter and think, well, if he thought I could do it, then I can probably do it. And that, you know, that was a great source of encouragement. So yeah, the generation ahead of me have always been kind to me, and in that sense, I suppose I have been mentored. But it's a strange thing, the broadcasting industry, in that, broadly speaking, there's never been formal mentoring. You know, you sort of learn on the job, and you sink or swim.
Yeah, oh, fair enough. A little birdie told me you're a Watford fan. Is that because you were, I mean, sort of brought up there, or how did that happen? And
well,
and from the commentary side, how do you sort of stay unbiased?
the situation is this: I wasn't brought up a Watford fan, but I moved to the area as a young adult, just as I was starting my family. And when my oldest son, who is now an adult and far away, but when he was sort of 3, 4, 5 years old and just noticing football and saying who should, I support, and mentioning all the big teams like Manchester United and Liverpool and all that, I said, no, I'll take you to watch the local team. And that local team was halfway down the championship and was Watford. And since then, there have been 2 further boys in my life, and my wife and the 3 boys. We have centered a lot of our life around Watford, and Watford go up and Watford come down. And, it's been a lovely, lovely thing, because Watford's a harmless club. It's a lovely club, really friendly, really friendly. And so it's been good. And in terms of how it dovetails with my professional life, the answer is it doesn't. It really doesn't. I can't deny it's probably easier as a professional to support a small club like Watford, because they don't create a big buzz. If somebody said you're a Manchester United fan, that's going to be a problem for millions of Liverpool fans. But I would also say that there are Manchester United fans who commentate and Liverpool fans who commentate and so on. And it really, really shouldn't matter. If somebody tells you that a commentator is biased or whatever, I'm telling you that's nonsense. Because when you go to support your team as a fan, you go with your heart. When you go to work, you go with your head. And the two are completely separate. It's really a complete irrelevance. When I'm commentating on a Watford game, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a sort of mad, passionate, jump up and down and scream type fan anyway. But when I'm commentating on a Watford game, I've forgotten that if I was sat on the other side of the ground, I'd be cheering for them to win. Your job means that you're tuned into who's got the ball, what's that, and you're just as excited when the opposition scorers, you have to be. It's just the same.
Football.
It's football, yeah. And when I commentate on England for a world commentary, of course I'm English. But I commentated on the World Cup semi-final against Croatia in Russia, and I think if you look back on that, when England took the lead, I was thrilled England had taken the lead. But when Croatia scored the winner, I don't think you could tell the difference. I was excited because Croatia had scored, because there'd be Croatian fans watching that. So honestly, it's fair enough to ask the question, and fine, but it's completely irrelevant professionally.
Oh, perfect. What's a day like in Peter Drury's shoes? A match day -1. What kind of preparation do you need to do? What kind of reading do you need to do? Because I know the commentary comes naturally, but as a job, you definitely need to prepare, right?
Yeah. Well, I always say that a football match is basically a day's work. So match day -1, if you like. If you take what you might call a regular job, working from 9 till 5, that basically 9 to 5 on average should sort out a football match in terms of all the biographical and historical information, bits and pieces. Now that average that is an average which veers at one extreme to a sort of mid-season game between 2 teams with which you're really familiar, and for which you can prepare perhaps a little bit more quickly than that, 4 or 5 hours. And at the other extreme, maybe match day 1 of the Champions League involving a team from Eastern Europe with which you're not familiar at all, and you've got to absolutely start from scratch. So there's great variety there in terms of time taken. But I say on average, 8 hours work for a game just about gets it done, so that you've got the detail you require and basically all bases covered. So for instance, in the Euros, you spend an awful lot of time preparing for a penalty shootout that never happens. That's sort of an hour and a half's work on what happened the last time they took penalties and who scored and who's missed and all of that stuff, and then it gets torn up at the end. I relate it often to being a schoolboy taking exams. You know, the exams you take, whatever they were called in your time, they were O levels in my time when you were 16 years old, GCSEs they call them now, whatever country you're in, that sort of teenage exam where you spend hours mugging it all up. It's in your head, it's all there,
Yep.
days and days, and then for 2 hours you spew it out, and the next morning you've forgotten it, and you're on to the next one. And that's a football match.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of envious people out there who really, I mean, look at you saying, oh man, this guy's just, your job is something that's, you're just talking football all the time. It must be amazing.
Well, it is. Listen, it's a massive privilege. It's a massive privilege. And like any other job, Arab, you can have good days and bad days. You can have days when it's gone well and days when it's not gone well. Days when you don't feel like doing any work, days when you love doing your work and all of that. But I say that within the parameters of fully understanding that I'm very, very, very lucky to do it. And there are millions of people out there, not just who would love to do it, but who would be perfectly capable of doing it. You know, we can create this illusion that it's sort of untouchable and that nobody else can. Well, of course they can. Of course they can. And I'm just somehow luckily managed to wriggle through a couple of nets and you know, I'm doing it. And so are the others who do it, you know. So every time I feel like moaning and complaining and, you know, say, oh, this is wrong, and why am I doing that? Why would blah, blah, blah? I have to give myself a kick in the shin and say, come on, you know, you're a lucky boy.
Are you a pen paper kind of guy? Or you make your notes on an iPad or something?
Pen and paper. I'm falling further and further behind. My handwriting is absolutely terrible. So I'm the only one who can read it. But if I started trying to do my notes in some sort of computer format, as some of the younger guys are quite understandably doing now, it would take me just as long to work out how to do it as it would to actually do the notes that I need to learn. And I always say the notes, you know, the notes are only notes. You know, they're not an exhibition piece. They're not. I said people get very hung up. Listen, don't get me wrong. If you've got lovely, neat handwriting and your notes look beautiful, fine. That's fine. But the point of the notes is to have the information there so it's available to you when you need it. And I certainly am not hung up about how untidy my notes might or might not be, depending on how much of a rush I've been in and how bad my handwriting is. Because as long as I can read them and I've got the information there, that's the point of them.
Fair enough. I would imagine you have a lot of diaries. They would make for some really interesting social media posts later on if you feel the need to post photos of your notes.
Yeah.
But any standout games for you? I know you did the World Cup final at the Maracana. You were at the stadium, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I was.
In 2014. Was that one of the most iconic for you, or anything else?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the event, I mean, the World Cup final is the biggest game in the world, so wherever it was is special. I've now attended 3 World Cup finals, commentated on 2 of them, and I must say that that one probably is the one, because certainly for a European, you know, maybe a South American would say there's nothing like a World Cup final at Wembley Stadium. Well, I'm lucky enough to have been to Wembley Stadium many, many times.
Yeah.
I think for a European, there's a mystique about the Maracana, and you know, it's just the kind of temple of world sport. And so to be in there for a World Cup final was incredible. And you know, with Christ the Redeemer up there and the wonderful backdrop and all of that, it was just remarkable sense of privilege again. Think, wow, I'm here, and think of the number of people who would love to be here. You know, it's a very, very special thing, and it was a fairly unremarkable game. I guess the only thing that would have made it better would be Brazil being in it. But of course, they'd lost 7-1 in the semi-final, so that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it was no, that was fantastic. Not the greatest game by any means. In fact, it went on and on and on and on until somebody eventually scored. But it was great to be.
Oh, yeah, I watched Belgium Russia in the same World Cup, and just that stadium was unreal.
Yes.
So yeah, I can imagine during the final and the semi-final, it must have been a different emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. No, well, that was a great World Cup. That was terrific, because Brazil, of course, has a football heartbeat. But I've been fortunate enough to do all the World Cups since 1998, and they all have a different flavour. I loved the South African World Cup, and people, you're asking my favourite games. I mean, one of my favourite games and moments, perhaps my favourite, was the opening game of that World Cup, when a guy called Shabalala scored a goal for South Africa against Mexico.
Left footer.
Oh, it was a wonderful, wonderful goal.
Fantastic.
But the emotion that went around that goal and that moment and that day was really, really special in a way that transcends football and sport altogether. That was about the unification of a nation in a way. The fact that black men and women and white men and women were arm in arm, smiling, joyful, and if you could bottle the mood of that stadium at the moment Shabalala scored that goal, or indeed in the moments of people just walking through the gates and into the stadium, if you could bottle that and somehow inject it into the world, what a world we'd have. It was like for a few glorious, unreal moments, reality had been, or sort of the stark and sometimes nasty reality of the world had been overtaken by this wonderful, utterly unrealistic sense of we're all in this together and isn't it great? And I just wish that could last.
No, I mean, the way you portray things, it does. Feel you put us right in the emotions, and I'm glad you've also taken the time out to speak to us. I'm going to pull in like I said, we have Samrat Ghosh, who's our co-host. He's also the co-founder of Sportifan, and he's a youth leader. 30, we call him the 30 under 30 gentleman. Samrat, if you can hear us, you can turn on your mic and your camera, and the floor is yours for the next 5 to 7 minutes.
Hi, Samrat.
Oh, hi, Peter. Thank you, Arup, for the wonderful introduction. So, how are you doing, Peter?
I'm in good form, thank you. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, it's always great to speak to you. So, so my first question to you is, what's your advice to the young aspirants who are willing to come or just arrived in the sports business fraternity?
My advice is always to be real and to do what you're doing because you feel a genuine pull to do it, because your enthusiasm is authentic, because you love the sport that you're involved in, and because you love the aspect of the sport that you're involved in. It's such a competitive industry, the sports industry, certainly the broadcasting industry, that it feels almost criminal that anyone would pursue it who didn't really want to do it, because there are plenty who really do want to do it. And so as you set out on your career, I would say the number one piece of advice is to stay true to yourself and let your enthusiasm lead you. Of course, be humble, of course, listen and learn, and take time out, but also be proud in the knowledge that you mean it. You mean it. That's the bottom line. Mean it.
Well, that's absolutely great. So that now brings me to my next question. That nowadays you can see that jobs in sports industry are very much role specific. So you can see that various universities and colleges across the globe are offering various sports education, sports business education degrees and courses. So, what's your thought about the new courses that or those which are existing already in the market, which
Yeah,
are mainly catering to sports business?
yeah, Sabra, you broke up a little bit then, so I hope I'm going to answer the question that you asked. But yeah, there is a proliferation now of, as it were, formal education to get into sports broadcasting and sports business and so on. And I must say, I think that makes perfect sense. You know, it really does. In my day, these things didn't really exist in the same way, and we sort of muddled our way through, learned on the job, and hoped to get away with it. At least this way, there is a properly regulated method. There is a proper pathway. My only misgiving is that at the end of all this education, there are still only a certain number of jobs available. You know what I mean? And so you can have as many degrees and diplomas and all of those things as you like, but in the end, there are still lots of others who've got all the same degrees and diplomas, the competition remains the same. And in that sense, nothing has changed, because the ones who will thrive will be the ones who show that they mean it. You know, who go the extra mile, who really do something that illustrates a point of difference, and a genuine, authentic desire to carry on and thrive in a career.
Yeah, great. So now that brings me to my last question. That is, sports commentary. We all know that Peter Drury is called the poetry of sports commentary. So I always had this question in my mind, that whether sports commentary is something that can be taught to someone, or it just comes naturally, with the flow.
That's a really interesting question, Samara. I'm not sure it can necessarily be taught, but I think it can, if you like, be learnt. That is to say that when you start out, you're bound not to be doing it as well as you will be when you've practiced a lot. It's like anything else in life. If you practice, you'll get better at it, you hope. And, it's like, in a sense, it's like playing sport, because, and I've spoken to other commentators about this, there are times when you feel like you're in form, and there are times when you feel like you're out of form. The words just come. It's like the great batsmen, sometimes they go out there, they're seeing the ball like this, and they're playing extra cover drives and back over the bowler's head for six, even before they've had a look. And then they go 3 weeks and they can't score a run, and so there is good form and there's bad form. That's definitely true. But I think over a period of time, it's definitely true that you improve. And when you're young in the industry, all you can hope is that you're lucky enough to have a boss or bosses or leaders or mentors who are prepared to stick with you while you're learning, allow you to make your mistakes, because mistakes are an inevitable part of it. If you're talking without a script for 2 hours, you're going to say something you wish you hadn't, and you can't be beating yourself up about that. That's just how it is. And so learning to forgive yourself for those errors, and understanding that over time, hopefully you'll keep getting better at it. That's all key. But in terms of your sort of starting question, can you be taught? I think that's tough. I think to a large degree, it's kind of in there, or maybe it's not. I don't know. That we could talk for 2 hours about that, but I hope I've answered it a little bit.
Yeah, so thank you for your response. All over to you.
No, thanks, Samrat. Those are really pertinent questions. Appreciate
Peter,
it.
thank you.
Peter, you mentioned a cover drive in there somewhere. How much of a cricket fan are you?
No, well, I mean, I love cricket. I've got to put it out there at once, Arab, that insofar as I was ever a cricketer, I was never more than a very, very poor one. And I love watching cricket. I have loved playing cricket, however poorly. I'm in no sense a cricket expert and wouldn't pretend to be. I just enjoy the game and love seeing it played well.
Well, I mean, well, believe me or not, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Indians who would love to hear you commentate on some cricket games, on some cricket matches. Would that be something that would be interesting
It
for
would
you?
be, listen, it would be a pipe dream. I don't think it's likely. I have commentated on cricket way back in my local radio days. When I was with the BBC in Leeds, we used to cover
Okay.
Yorkshire cricket. And
Right.
actually, I met the great Sachin when he came over to play for Yorkshire.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's a great thrill in my life. I mean, when he was very, very young. So that was great. I used to love doing it. And my county of birth is Kent. And so I follow Kent cricket very closely. But these days in cricket broadcasting, almost all of the guys have played international cricket. You know, and much as I would love to be able to describe a beautiful cricketing scene, you know, I can't read a spinner out of the hand. I can't read a pitch and tell you if it's going to turn or not. I could have no input into a discussion about whether somebody's front foot has got stuck on the crease or whether they're getting over their cut shot or all of that. It would just be ridiculous coming from me. So much as that might be a pipe dream to commentate on top level cricket, I think very quickly the viewers would see through me and realize that this guy's a mug.
Fair enough. No, but like I said, I mean, it would be well, we could always do maybe a couple of local Indian games. You never know.
Yeah, well, that would be fun. It would be fun. It would be fun. But I wouldn't want anybody to think that I was taking myself too seriously. Because if you saw me bat, Arab, you know, you'd know what you were dealing with.
Fair enough. So, I mean, another World Cup coming up next year.
Yes.
Are you? I mean, I know you said you've been covering and doing World Cup since 1998. Does it ever get old for you? I mean, is there excitement, nervousness, all of that?
Yes. No, there is. It doesn't actually. It doesn't. You know, the next World Cup is going to be a very different one. For a start, in terms of the time of year, you know, we're going to be coming out of an English winter into, Qatar is sort of summer all the time as far as we're concerned, into a very hot environment. And it's going to be different. So, you know, it's going to be a World Cup which isn't comparable with any of the previous ones. And I'm excited by the prospect of that. You know, all we do in commentary, in sports journalism in general, is follow a narrative, you know, and all we ask for in any given game, never mind tournament or whatever, is a narrative. You know, what's the story? What's the story? That's what we need to know. Whether it's, you know, Manchester United against Liverpool or Burnley against Watford or England against New Zealand, you know, we need a story, and this Qatar World Cup is going to be a story one way or another. It's going to be fascinating.
Fascinating is really the right word. Peter, it has been an absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out. Really appreciate it. I know, like you said, conversation about football and your work, and well, we can go on for hours. And I would really love that. But at the end of the day, I mean, don't want to take more of your time. But last question: Would you think of? I know you said you don't want to be on social media, stay away, but maybe start your own YouTube channel. Who knows? Is that something that you've ever thought about?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't see it happening very soon. I'm sorry if that's a disappointment.
No,
and it's certainly that I would make clear to everyone, I don't feel I'm above it or better than it, or it's poor or it's wrong. I know millions and millions of people do it, but I'm a relatively private person, and I like when I finish my day's work to put my pen down and relax with my family. And I don't feel the need to be out there. You know, in fact, I like not being out there. And so until something changes my mind on that, I'm quite comfortable with staying in my own little box.
No, I'll tell you the flip side of it is there's millions of people around the world. When they hear your commentary, I know that they feel like they're your friend, and it's so you're definitely already out there, and you are part of everybody's football journey. I would say, and really thank you for that.
Well, I think that's a really, really kind thing to say, Arab. That means an awful lot to me. And indeed, if there are plenty saying the same thing, that means an awful lot to me several times over. So thank you very much for that. And I've loved our conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter, and all the best. I know you've just come back from vacation, so take it easy and appreciate again you taking the time out.
Thank you.